Equal access to justice is a core American value. In each episode of Talk Justice, an LSC podcast, we will explore ways to expand access to justice and illustrate why it is important to the legal community, businesses, government, and the general public. Talk Justice is sponsored by the Leaders Council of the Legal Services Corporation.
The legal aid community has always sort of been at the forefront of pushing what technology can do. And part of that is because it's driven by necessity. We can't live in the way that the regular for-profit legal world lives because we have problems to solve in the immediate now.
Hello and welcome to Talk Justice. I'm your host, Jason Taché, a member of the Emerging Leaders Council at the Legal Services Corporation and editor of the Justice Tech Download newsletter. In this episode, we'll be discussing how technology can help expand pro bono legal services, especially as the pandemic has caused soaring demand for legal assistance. To accomplish this, I'm joined by three guests. Jane Ribadeneira is the program analyst for technology at the Legal Services Corporation. Kristen Sonde is the chief of operations at Paladin, a platform connecting lawyers with pro bono clients. And Dorna Mawini is the founder and CEO of Documate, a document automation platform. Like myself, both Kristen and Dorna are also Emerging Leaders Council members at LSC. Thank you all for being with us. Now, Jane, I wanted to start with you and start broadly. Are people in the US getting the civil legal services they need? And if not, in what ways are we falling short?
A few years ago, the Legal Services Corporation funded a study called, and we released a report called The Justice Gap. In this report, we did a comprehensive study across our organizations and found that 86% of civil legal problems reported by low-income Americans received inadequate or no legal help whatsoever. And we also found that over 70% of low-income households experience at least one civil legal problem in a year. You know, some of the reasons for this that were identified were things like low-income Americans just don't even necessarily identify a problem as a legal issue, is one of the things that we learned in this report. We also saw that they only seek help for 20% of the civil legal problems they may face. So, you know, the quick answer is, you know, really no. Legal services is not being adequately met across this country, given the overwhelming need. And certainly with the pandemic, we've just seen an incoming flood of additional legal problems. So this report was done about 3 years ago. So does not adjust for the overwhelming additional need due to the pandemic.
It's probably also worth noting that 3 years ago, the United States was going through the longest economic expansion of its history, and the situation was still not good. So certainly now, we can only imagine those numbers to be significantly worse. Kristen, there's a lot of ways that this access to justice gap that Jane is talking about is being dealt with. And one of those ways is pro bono legal help, where attorneys volunteer their time to help clients who would otherwise not have access to legal assistance. And now, as Jane was saying, a lot of the focus for this population when we talk about the access to justice gap tends to be discussion about indigent people, people of lower economic means. However, you recently wrote about data indicating that more nonprofits and entrepreneurs were also seeking out pro bono help. So can you help us understand who exactly is in need of pro bono legal help and why?
Sure. Yeah. So just to give a little bit of background on Paladin, kind of the data that I collected. So our mission is to increase access to justice by helping legal teams run more efficient pro bono programs, as you alluded to. So we work with a number of law firms and in-house counsel team to help them connect with their attorneys with local legal services organizations to help people in need. So we looked at some data regarding pro bono work from the first half of this year compared to data from this time last year. And to your point, found that about 30% of pro bono recipients were nonprofits and low-income entrepreneurs. Now, the justice gap typically affects folks from minority backgrounds, women and immigrants in particular, But to your point, we've seen a shift towards nonprofits and entrepreneurs in particular as we've seen the economic consequences of COVID-19. So as we see funding sources and revenue dry up, and we've seen the government implement a number of programs to help protect jobs, we saw a huge shift in need and resources being allocated to help people claim these different program benefits. So about 30% of pro bono recipients this year were nonprofits and entrepreneurs, compared to about 23% in 2019. That has since decreased a little bit as these programs have sunsetted, but we did see a big shift there. And of course, there are other related pro bono consequences around economic incidents related to COVID, such as unemployment benefits and other things like that, that we're seeing spike around the economic consequences.
And is that true for the entrepreneurs you're seeing as well? What are the issues that you are finding are now becoming more common, at least within these last few months?
Yeah, sure. So of course they have to navigate issues related to these government programs, having to deal with contracts that they may be stuck in, that they're unable to get out of because of the way that COVID has shifted events and workforce operations. They're having to deal with employees who have been laid off or potentially furloughed. And Black and Latinx communities in particular have been the hardest hit. And we've seen that translate on the business side as well.
I want you to dig into that maybe just a little bit before I bring Dorna into the conversation. But at the moment, the country is seeing racial and ethnic disparities in everything from access to medical care to policing to eviction. And you're indicating that this is no different in regards to what you're seeing in your pro bono data. Why are these communities in greater need now than, say, their white counterparts?
Sure. So we're seeing a lot of Black and Latinx folks who are really on the front line of the pandemic. So, they're working in environments that are particularly susceptible to being affected. They're working in, bars and restaurants. They're working on the front line in healthcare, in these small businesses, in communities that are being hard hit as well. And so they're dealing with issues not just around employment, but also related incidents of increased COVID cases, so health issues, family-related issues as a second and third order consequence, and also housing as they lose their economic stability. So there are a lot of consequences that are surrounding these communities that start with their places of employment and are greatly affected by the effects of COVID as they kind of splinter out from those locations.
So then, listening to what Jane and Kristen have to say, clearly the problem is vast, and it's affecting different communities harder than others around the country. And pro bono to help alleviate some of these problems is being tackled in a number of different ways. Dorna, I was hoping that you could first introduce us to this concept of what no-code tools are, and then tell us how they can help bridge this gap that both Kristen and Jane have lined out for us.
Definitely. Thank you, Jason. So just first to give a little bit of background on what no-code tools are, there are other ways that we can serve some of the people who need legal services in this country, including through guided interviews. The most common analogy I use is the TurboTax model, where you ask people a series of questions that take them down a set of different paths depending on their answers, and then generate documents for them. So these historically have been much more difficult to set up or have required technical expertise. So what no-code tools do is they allow lawyers on the ground, so maybe some of these same pro bono lawyers or lawyers who are working at legal aid organizations, to take the expertise that's in their brains and build platforms without needing to know how to code. And the way that applies to the current crisis, as Jane mentioned there, in terms of the statistics, there is a huge unmet need in terms of legal services in this country. And while pro bono lawyers are greatly needed and definitely part of the solution, we're never going to have enough pro bono lawyers to serve that entire population. And if those people don't get pro bono legal aid, their alternative would be to go to a regular lawyer, which most of these people can't afford. The average person in the US makes about $25 an hour. Minimum wage is much lower than that. The average lawyer in America is $350 an hour, but 40% of people in this country don't have enough savings to pay even a $400 emergency bill. So we think that tech is part of that solution. We have, and specifically building guided interviews to either guide self-represented litigants or to expedite and scale the work of pro bono lawyers and legal aid lawyers. So that's what some of these no-code tools are able to do, is allow that expertise to be automated.
Jane, I have a similar question for you. What is the Legal Services Corporation working on right now when it comes to the pro bono world?
So we have a couple of different special programs that we have funding for. I work with our Technology Initiative Grant Program, and then we also have a very similar fund called our Pro Bono Innovation Fund. Both of these, we have allocated about $4 to $5 million a year for both programs to fund special initiatives. It's across the board for legal services, but a number of these programs have addressed the need to, how do you expand pro bono, both using technology, as well as additional staffing. As Dorna said, the technology is, one aspect of being able to help improve the efficiency of delivering some of these services. We also have to remember, some of the things we've learned is that the pro bono attorneys, often need training in order to take on these cases, even when there's maybe an automated form or document that they can help the client with. It may be an area of law they don't regularly do in their everyday practice. So one of the things we've been funding to build is to provide the training that the pro bono attorneys might need. So online classrooms, there's a project that was built called Learn the Law. South Carolina and Connecticut legal services have built kind of modular classrooms for the pro bono attorneys to go through and get familiar with maybe doing a guardianship or child support modification for a client. And that way, when a clinic opportunity does come up, they feel comfortable going in and taking on those cases. There's also a project that was funded in Massachusetts that helped improve the ability to find the cases, as well as find the resources for the pro bono attorneys. It kind of provides checklists for them. So even if they've gone to a training and then they have the case, they can refer back to the materials very quickly. They are now also doing some modular online classrooms that have been built out by some professional online education organizations. And that's in an area of great need right now around eviction defense. So those are some of the opportunities and projects that we've seen are really needed and help kind of merge both the technology along with identification of the pro bono volunteers and helping the volunteers feel comfortable.
And so, Jane, your point on this need for training, the attorney that does major business deals during the day might not know how to handle an eviction case when they come and volunteer their time. And so obviously this is like the first hurdle. But after you go through the training, Kristen, I'm curious to this, is that some of the data that you had indicated that when the pandemic started and the quarantine started, you saw more people volunteering their time for pro bono, and then that number has begun to drop off more recently. So after this investment into training a pro bono attorney happens, whether it's in person or online, what are the efforts that can be made to retain these people, to make sure that they keep coming back, that they're frequent flyers in the pro bono system?
Sure. So I think something that was really exciting for the pro bono community is that, not only did we see an increase in pro bono engagement overall, but we saw a number of folks take on pro bono for the first time. And that was encouraging because, as a pro bono counsel once told me, no one does pro bono just once. So I think there is, a deep sense of interest and willingness and enthusiasm in giving back to one's community, especially during such a difficult time. So even though I think we did see a peak in pro bono in around April, when folks were getting into more of a remote cadence and undergoing these trainings and taking on their first cases, things did die down a little bit. But I think the consequences of COVID are going to be long term, right? And I think that legal needs are going to come in waves. So we saw a huge surge in that work for nonprofits and entrepreneurs towards the beginning. We are about to see a huge surge in housing issues as protections sunset in the coming weeks and months. We're seeing unemployment benefits, expiring, and hopefully there will be some new relief introduced, but we'll see, folks affected long term because of those types of issues. So hopefully, as folks get a training or two under their belt and they become more comfortable with the pro bono work that they're taking on, their law firms will continue to support and augment their work. It's definitely going to be a marathon here and not a sprint. So I think the more that we can come together and support each other and provide resources to help pro bono attorneys, take on and succeed in their cases, the more tailwind we'll have moving forward.
And Jane, I wonder if you want to build on that at all. Is there anything that LSC is finding in regards to retaining pro bono counsel and making sure people come back?
Sure. It still takes a personal connection with the pro bono attorneys. That's one of the reasons why our programs have pro bono coordinators, and there's a certain amount of staffing that's involved with placing those cases, recruiting the attorneys, keeping them involved, keeping them up to date, making those connections. There really is no substitute we found for having a person, whether it be the legal services organization. In some cases, that can be leadership also from a judge or a senior partner in a private law firm. You need to identify those people that can keep bringing people back. The other thing we've found too is you need to make the opportunities as convenient as possible for the pro bono attorneys. One of the things we're finding as a result of the pandemic is attorneys are becoming more comfortable on using technology, on using remote technology, attending hearings virtually. That might actually help expand some of the opportunities. If a pro bono attorney can log on remotely to a hearing and have a discrete period of time and not have to go to the courthouse and wait all day to be called for that case, that's going to help improve and get more volunteers and expand the services provided.
One of the things that I found interesting watching the legal community and the courts react to the pandemic is that we've seen courts in a lot of states rapidly adopt things like video conferencing and other technologies to make sure that the wheels of justice can keep turning. But at the same time, we see government agencies reeling from budget shortfalls and law firms cutting salaries and tightening their belts as the economy has contracted. And I kind of see these as opposite sides of the same coin in regards to the legal communities dealing with the pandemic. And Dorna, I'm curious, what are you finding in your work? Is this a time when you're experiencing high demand for a product like yours, or are you finding potential partners tepid to expand their work in a new way?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there are lots of law firms specifically who have scaled back on their summer associate programs or shortened them, or may just not have enough work for their summer associates to do. And what we're seeing is they have bright prospects about the future and they want to keep those attorneys trained. And so it's actually been a really great opportunity for some of those law firms to give a helping hand through their associates and summer associates to work on pro bono cases, or also to work hand in hand with legal aid organizations to build out some of the tech tools that they may not have had the time and bandwidth to work on before. We have been really pushing that in terms of just building relationships between law firms who have those excess resources or want to have additional training and legal aid organizations who need to be connected with them.
Now, one of the things that was brought up earlier in the call that I'm interested in maybe digging a little bit more, and Jane, I think this, correct me if I wrote down the stats wrong, was that about only 20% of low-income Americans actually seek out legal help for the legal problem they're having. And it seems like there's an identification problem here. People don't know that the problem they're having is a legal problem. So I'm curious if and I leave this open to any of you, if there are aspects of the programs that you're doing that are helping people know that they should be clients for pro bono legal services. Because it seems like even though there is more demand than supply at the moment, like that demand could be significantly larger than it even is now. And I'm curious how you are considering tackling that. Kristen, I see you nodding, so maybe I'll throw it to you first.
Yeah, well, it just reminds me of a few different initiatives I've been reading about recently. So, so as we've all heard, Utah and other states are now thinking about a lot of regulatory reform that would make it easier for example, folks who are not lawyers to get involved with legal assistance. And one project that I worked on with the Chicago Bar Foundation, Chicago Bar Association's task force, was identifying the role for community justice navigator as one example of someone who would be already a local trusted community member, maybe someone who works in a school or in a religious institution, who people can go to talk about some of their issues. And as we alluded to in the beginning, folks don't know that they're necessarily legal problems. They just have a problem and they can go to this person, talk through them and then get a trusted referral to either a legal services organization or online resources, self-guided interviews that can help address these issues or at least direct them to folks who can assist. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for regulatory reform to help folks identify problems, legal problems where they can seek help. And then I think there's also an opportunity for the majority of folks who get turned away from legal services organizations because of capacity issues to turn to online resources that are vetted, that are automated to help with some of these questions to resolve on their own, or thinking about some of the new pro se litigant tools that are out there, thinking about companies like Courtroom 5 and People Clerk who are addressing folks' needs who are going to court on their own, just helping them understand and navigate the system in a more thorough way and a better educated way would be meaningfully better than no resources at all. So those are the things that have been top of mind for me recently.
Yeah, the legal navigators is a great point. One of the things that's kind of similar to that we're seeing and growing is medical legal partnerships. So a legal aid organization will partner with, say, a children's hospital in their community and actually have an attorney in the offices. They'll go in and train some of the medical providers to help issue spot that something might be a underlying legal issue or have a legal solution. Say, for instance, if a child is coming in and has asthma problems, there might be mold issues in their home. So they could refer them to the attorney to kind of dig in and recognize that there might be a legal solution to those issues. The other thing in terms of some technology solutions to address this, We've been working with a Stanford Legal Design Lab on a project to develop a legal schema. It's kind of technical, but essentially what it is testing that if you're tagging the trusted legal aid and legal statewide websites that have been built up across the country with appropriate tags to allow, when people are using more natural language to do searches on Google, that those results will rise up in their Google results, and they can go to the websites. Some of those websites now might be building chatbots to help kind of do a question and answer. A lot of them have, for many years, have had some live chat navigators, so that when people visit the sites, they have volunteers. Sometimes it's law students. Sometimes it's even just legal navigators that are working on this chatbot in order to help the person identify what their need might be and point them to the right resources to get help.
And I just want to echo what Jane said about medical legal partnerships, because that's something that we've seen a lot as well. I think the issue of people who don't know that they have a legal problem is a really difficult one to tackle, because you don't really know where to find them. But there are these other locations that may not be legal aid organizations or legal offices where you can find them. So we work with a lot of domestic violence shelters, and so similar to the asthma issues, when someone goes into a hospital or a doctor, they can have referral programs that can refer them to the local legal aid or as well.
So knowing whether or not someone has a legal problem is one part of the access puzzle. The other part, especially now, as libraries and other community hubs are closed, is when everything's virtual, how do people get online when they might not have reliable internet or a modern technical device? So Jane, I was curious to how you think about this, and maybe then we can open this up to everybody else. But there's this digital divide in this country. Broadband internet misses something like 40 million people across the US, primarily in rural communities. So how does LSC think about this issue?
Yeah, this is something I've been tracking for many years, and you're right on with it. It's a little over 40 million Americans don't even have access to broadband, even if they wanted it or could afford it. And we're finding, more and more people are what we call smartphone reliant. So they only go online using their smartphones, and of course that obviously skews higher to low-income people, to people of color. And also younger people now are really foregoing broadband. So you have partnerships, and with libraries being closed, that's in the pandemic, that's been a big issue. With courts moving to online hearings, that's been an issue. We've tried a number of different projects. Sometimes, Montana is a great example. They have I think it takes 11 hours to drive across the state of Montana. It's equivalent to driving from DC to Chicago. And I think they have about 15 attorneys to cover that entire area. So they've had to try and find ways to use technology to kind of bridge this gap. They can partner with a social service agency and help people, go there to get online and access those tools. But one of the things we have to remember is sometimes the lowest tech can be the best tech in these cases. The telephone is still a really good tool to reach people. Text messaging is also maybe even a better tool these days to reach people. We've seen a lot of in pro bono programs where they get a volunteer attorney to just have an appointment for 30 minutes of advice on a telephone call. And often sometimes once that relationship has started, the pro bono attorney will then, send a letter or do a little bit of limited service with the client. So, you have to remember sometimes low tech can also be the best tech too in instances.
Kristen and Dorna, same question to you, especially for two people that founded technology companies. How do you think about the digital divide when it comes to this access to justice gap?
Yeah, I think that smartphone technology, as Jane said, is incredibly important. 80% of people in the US have access to a smartphone, and that number is growing every year. And so having tools where even if they don't have broadband internet, they can go on their phone and access that or go a long way. Um, we've seen a lot of people experimenting more with text message like guided workflows where you may answer a series of questions that guide you to the right pro bono attorney and help you get access that way. And then traditional form, a lot of courts still require you to be filing things by mail, especially in more rural areas. And so having more people on video conferencing tools or some kind of dial-in for the video conferencing tool can be really, really helpful in getting them access as well.
And I think, in the absence of technology, pro bono legal assistance and just legal assistance in general really comes down to relationships and people helping others to navigate our judicial system. And so it will help us, especially in the areas that Jane mentioned, where there are very few lawyers to serve a large swath of the state or a community. It will help to pinpoint, who are the other folks that people rely on in this community for information and direction and guidance, and how do we equip them with the tools and the education that's necessary to help folks identify their issue and then address it properly. So really making sure that we're figuring out where these folks are going for their information and providing them with the tools that they need to help inform others.
On a good day in a good economy, the work that you three do is hard. And the days lately have not been so great. And the economy, of course, is not doing well either. I think it's a period of time where a lot of people find it easy to be pessimistic about the world that we all inhabit. But I'm curious to what keeps you three going. Like, what are you optimistic about? And Jane, we can start with you.
I think I said this earlier, but I think that the pandemic has really the good side of it. And what I'm optimistic about is that things that we've been pushing for many years and have seen very slow adoption of, has multiplied in so many ways. How people are making connections and using technology, and courts are changing some of their systems and some of their processes and making it easier. And I don't think that we're going to go back to the way it was before the pandemic. And that makes me optimistic that I think people have seen that some of these new ways of doing things can actually work and will be continued to be adopted and maybe brought more into just the regular processes of the way that courts work and the way that people can obtain access to justice.
Kristen, what keeps you going?
So, in the past few months, we have seen just a huge surge in interest and engagement in pro bono work, really more than in the last few years. I almost want to say combined, because people are so eager to plug into their communities and figure out a way to help. So I've been so encouraged by that. And, the number of folks who are doing pro bono for the first time, who are getting trained, who are stepping outside of their comfort zone and really being able to make an impact is incredibly encouraging. And hopefully as all of this COVID, all these COVID consequences continue on, we'll continue to see that type of engagement.
And Dorna, what are you optimistic about at this time?
Yeah, I think that the legal aid community has always sort of been at the forefront of pushing what technology can do. Every single year when I go to the LSC TIG conference, there are conversations being had there that I think feel like they're very much on the edge of what's being had within the rest of the legal community. And part of that is because it's driven by necessity. We can't live in the way that the regular for-profit legal world lives because we have problems to solve in the immediate now. And I think COVID has only really exacerbated that. And it's something that is ever present. Every single one of us has been affected by COVID in some way or another, obviously many much worse than others. But it has also created a sort of empathy for the problems that are going on. And I think that has partially been, in my conversations with pro bono lawyers, the reason that they're getting involved in higher numbers. So hopefully it's going to be a tipping point for both technology and for pro bono legal assistance.
Well, I like that as a note to end on. I'd like to thank Jane, Kristen, and Dorna for being with us on Talk Justice today. For links to what we discussed, please check out our show notes. If you like what you heard, please leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Talk Justice is produced by Kristen Reardon, with support by Catherine Fairland, Shanika Richardson, and Marta Cruz. Our fearless leader is Carl Rauscher. I'm Jason Taché, and thank you for listening. Podcast guest speakers' views, thoughts, and opinions are solely their own and do not necessarily represent the Legal Services Corporation's views, thoughts, or opinions. The information and guidance discussed in this podcast are provided for informational purposes only and should not be construed as legal advice. You should not make decisions based on the podcast content without seeking legal or other professional advice.